Good morning, everybody. We'll get started here in just a minute. Give a few minutes for others to roll in. Hmm. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started here. For This is our first time on Zoom. So for those of you that have been with us before on these monthly webinars, hopefully we go off without a hitch here. So I'm just hedging my bets right now, and I'm letting you know that we've got a new technology we're working with here. Anyhow, thanks for taking some time out of your day today. My name is Chris Thomas. My firm is 40W Advisors. We have the privilege to serve as the retirement plan consultants on your company's 401k plan. As part of that service, we every month we provide a financial wellness webinar. We tackle a different financial topic that we know people, employees, your coworkers, might have on their mind. So this may be relevant to you, might be relevant to children, parents, what have you. We want to hit a topic every month, make you a little more educated on financial issues that you or someone you know might have going on in their life. So this month we are just talking about really home buying. We're going to focus a lot on maybe buying a first home, a second home, and maybe touch a little bit on rental properties. So before we jump in, just a couple administrative matters. First, everybody should be joined in listen only mode. If you do have any questions, please use the questions box. There should a Q&A box that you should have on the meeting control panel. Ask questions there, and I'll try to keep an eye on it. I'll make sure we answer it on the fly, or certainly have some room for Q&A at the end. Really would love questions. Want to make this a little bit interactive, make sure you're getting answers to the questions you have. With only, 25, 30 minutes to present, it kind of limits how much information we can share with you. So you have questions, we want to make sure we get you answers. Um, the second thing is everything we talk about today is just for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing should be considered financial advice specific to you. For that, you'll obviously want to talk with your own personal financial advisors, tax advisors, attorneys, what have you. So, with that out of the way, June's webinar is on deconstructing the home buying decision, and co-presenting with me today is Lauren Heisey. She's a good friend and a successful realtor in the Northern Virginia, DC area. Lauren, hello.
Hi,
And
thanks for having me.
you want to just let everyone know, tell everyone a little more about you and your background and what you do.
Sure, of course. So, as Chris said, I'm a realtor primarily in Northern Virginia, a little bit into DC, and I have been in real estate since 2001 in some different capacities. I worked for a builder initially, and usually most builders are not licensed agents. So, if you ever walk into a community where they're selling new construction homes, I was one of those people. And what we would do is primarily try to get you to buy within our community, but not necessarily other places. And around 2010, a friend of mine who Chris also knows said, stop working on new construction and get licensed and work as a real estate agent. So I've been doing that since 2010 and love it, and just run around to lots of different areas in the areas that I grew up in. So it's been fun.
And Lauren and her team are, one of the top volume, I think, realtors in certainly in the state, right? And I think maybe a little so. So a lot of experience there, and that's why I asked wanted Lauren to join us. She's worked with buyers of all different types, so I think she can lend a lot of a lot of insight to the discussion we're going to have today on the home buying process and things to consider. So let's jump in. Um, and really, what I want to start just by talking about is kind of frame this as, the decision to buy a home, whether it's your first, your second, your eighth, your 10th, it's a big decision. And the reason why buying a property, buying real estate is a big decision is that it's the only purchase where you really are going to be committing some money up front from a down payment standpoint. So you're going to be taking some of your savings that you've accumulated throughout your life, and you're going to be putting that into this property. By doing that, you're also locking up, probably if taking out a loan, a mortgage, you're locking up future income. So that savings that you're not going to have to rely on, and it's also income that's going to be, consumed by making your monthly mortgage payment. So you're making a commitment of your financial resources, and in some regards, you're also making a commitment of your time because, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, when the decision to buy a home is something where you want to make sure that you're able to stay in that home for a long enough period of time to where you're able to kind of make the economics work for you. So it's a big decision. And I know, Lauren, when people come to you, I imagine a lot of conversations you have with people are, hey, I'm thinking about buying. I'm not sure if I'm ready to buy. I'm not sure if it's a good idea. So just kind of, let everyone, how do you handle those situations and what's your kind of advice to people?
Sure. I think it's kind of the American dream, and what we've all been told for so many years is you need to go buy a house, and that's really what is kind of making you an adult and a successful person. But different markets are vary quite a bit. The DC area is really expensive, so the cost to entry to buy a house is really tough. We don't have a lot of inventory, and in some cases people are fighting over houses. So when somebody comes to me, I want to have a discussion about what their expectations are of the market, what they're looking for, and really if that's a need that we can meet and if it really makes the most sense for them. Most of the buyers in my area are pretty educated about the home buying process. They, I'm sure, have read or seen little snippets on the news about what the market is. So I like to ask them what they're hearing about the market, what they think the market is, and discuss to them the reality of what they might be seeing. So, for example, right now, our market is quieting down a little bit in the DC area. And I think it's a little bit easier to buy a house than it was even a couple months ago. So that's helpful. And I talked to a client yesterday that I initially started working with in 2023. And they came back to me and they said, hey, we weren't really ready then. And we think we're ready now. And I said, well, great. This is even a better market for you to buy in. But primarily, the big thing to think about is talking to a loan officer and talking to someone to figure out, do I have the money that it's going to take to be able to put in to make this purchase? And what's my mortgage payment looking like? And is the mortgage payment going to be something that's affordable to me and to my lifestyle and my future plans? I'm thinking of having a baby, so I need to start thinking about daycare and some of those things, and just the expenses of home ownership too.
Yeah, and I think
It's a
that's
lot of big
something.
picture stuff.
Yeah, and I think kind of something we talked about, earlier on too, and I'm kind of throwing, well, it's just the reality of it, of the dynamics. When people approach, if you're thinking about buying a home, you're not sure if you're ready or not. Well, the real point we want to drive home today is we want you to take a look and make that decision on your own after going through some thoughtful process about your own personal finances and your own needs and wants for what you have. That's the most important thing. And a lot of times when you're talking to professionals in the real estate, mortgage lenders, realtors, when you're talking, I mean, Lauren, we have some mortgage people in the mortgage business joining us today as well. Bottom line is, real estate professionals are compensated largely on transactions, right? Whether you buy a house or you don't. So sometimes, it's important that you make that decision that you're ready rather than, letting people, other professionals that, could. I know, Lauren, you would never. You would give honest advice about whether someone, based on what you're hearing, whether they're right to buy or not. But let's face it, there could be, some kind of conflicts there where it could be difficult to get a true, honest opinion on that. So that's why it's important that you go in understanding you do things on your terms. And it's going to start with just kind of figuring out first, let's just think about from a housing perspective, what do you need and what do you want? So how do those conversations kind of, when you're talking to somebody early on, Lauren, how do you kind of help them figure that out?
Sure. And to add on to what you were saying, realtors, they want to sell you a house, or they want to sell the house that you're trying to sell to move on to the next one. A loan officer wants to get you a loan. So what Chris is really emphasizing is you need to look at your financial picture and figure out a price range and a payment that's comfortable for you, because otherwise you might be buying something above your means. And as a realtor, I don't really know specifically what you qualify for. That's something the loan officer's looking at, but you also want to make sure you're making the right decision for yourself and how long you're going to be in the property. So, talking about needs, that's usually one of the first things that potential clients come to me with is, well, I'm renting this 2-bedroom apartment. I really want to buy my first house. I want to buy at least a townhouse. And I know that I need 2 bedrooms. I'd really like to have 3. We'd love to have 2 full baths. That way, when guests come in town, there's an extra bathroom. And a garage is a nice to have, but I don't have to have it. And that gives me some general criteria that I can use to start looking for properties, in concert with also hearing from a loan officer that you can qualify for X. So we'll look into some of those things, and sometimes those needs change. In the area where I am, a lot of people initially target something close to DC if possible, and then they realize, well, my goodness, the price to entry in that area is more expensive. So sometimes they look a little further out, or they say, well, we really wanted 3 bedrooms, but to be in the area that we want to be in, we're willing to look at two
So
bedrooms.
it's kind of all about prioritizing. Like,
Right,
you prioritize the size of the home, maybe the amenities versus the commute.
right.
And that's the bottom line. It's very important to have that conversation yourself, partner, spouse, about exactly what it is you're looking for, what your priorities are, because it's going to be that structure in what you want and need versus what you can afford. And we're going to talk more about how you get to that affording side here in a second. But and then what those wants and needs are really going to, kind of boil down to, along with the price point, are going to boil down to the right kind of home, right? There's, condo, townhouse, single family. People have different thoughts on and preferences. Some people, the condo, lower price point, less maintenance. A lot of times, maybe you can find them in more, urban, cities, if that's what you want, right? Townhouse is going to be, kind of the in between that and a single family home. So I think it's first and foremost, maybe not even being totally dead set on, I definitely don't want a townhouse. Okay, well, you know, be open-minded to it and then come back to that, based upon your needs, wants, and your financial ability. So let's talk about some of the financial side now. So step one, really spend time talking about needs, wants, document it, write it down, prioritize them, because you're going to anchor yourself to that. So the next thing is your budget. If you've joined us before in prior months, we've talked about budgeting and how to budget, and I've provided and showed you some tools that we can make available to you, that can help you budget. I'm not going to talk about those today. You can go to our website, 4AW Advisors. You can find the portal there where we can set it up for you. It's a place where you can track your expenses. And the reason why that's important is because, as Lauren mentioned, one of the first things that she's going to, or any realtor is going to suggest that you do, is that you also talk to a lender. And what the lender is going to do is they're going to look at your income, and they're going to look at your other debts that you have. So, making a monthly car payment, do you have student loan debt? They're going to look at your other debts. They're going to look at your credit score. So you're going to look at your income, credit score, your other debts, and then they're going to tell you how much you qualify for. And the important thing is that the amount that you qualify for should not be considered your budget and how much you actually spent. That is the maximum amount of money that the banks are willing to lend you. That does not, that's looking out for the banks, meaning that's how the banks manage their risk reward. The banks want to give you as large of a loan as they possibly can, because that's obviously more revenue for them. But what you need to pay attention to is your budget. Okay, great. I was approved, for uh, a mortgage of I could borrow up to $500,000, and that's going to be a $3,000 a month, $4,000 a month payment. Great. Well, does that work for you? So that's why it's important for you to look back at your budget. Figure out what's your income coming in? What are your regular expenses? So forget about housing expenses. What are your regular expenses? And then do you have enough of a gap there to take on a mortgage payment? And how is that mortgage payment as much as the lender wants, or is it less? As a rule of thumb, try to keep, total housing costs, we try to keep it about, 30%, 30, 40% of your monthly income.
And
The other
Chris,
thing
another
the
important
lender,
thing to add on is that when the loan officers are qualifying you, they're looking at debt that would be seen by a creditor. So a car payment, a student loan. But if you have additional expenses, let's say you have daycare or I'm trying to think of something else that you might put your money towards or what you'd want to potentially save for, or even with financial investments, you want to put a percentage of your income every month into a 401k or a certain dollar amount. They're not looking at that at all. They are just looking at if it came down to the bottom line, what are the expenses that this person has that they have to pay, not anything else they might want to put their money into. So you need to think about that overall picture for yourself, because the creditors and the lenders, they are just looking at what you specifically owe every month. And even with credit cards, they're looking at a minimum payment every month. They're not looking at, okay, I'm putting X dollars into my credit card every month. They're looking at that minimum going, okay, their minimum payment's $50 a month. So that's what we're going
yeah,
to look at as terms of qualification.
and I think the daycare expense is a really good one because daycare, if some of you may know firsthand, it's expensive. It's a big nut per month. So maybe you're looking at part of, it's kind of a natural progression, right? My partner, my spouse and I are looking at buying a home because we plan on growing a family. Great. Well, once you buy that home, you're buying that home now before you have daycare expenses. So think about your budget and what your budget's going to look like 3 years, 4 years down the road, once you maybe do have daycare. So think about how your budget's going to change. So that's why it's really important to not only think about it in the moment, but think about expenses you expect to take on in the near future. And the reason why, looking at, money income that you earn that is going towards housing, every dollar that you spend towards housing, it's a dollar not going towards somewhere else. It's a dollar not going to support what your needs are as a family or as an individual. It's money that's not going towards savings. So again, it gets back to you really committing yourself to, you're making a commitment, and you've got to see what am I going to be sacrificing with that increased cost. So now let's get into kind of the financing, right? So the financing, we'll talk briefly about this, and um, you know, I don't know, Lauren, you want to handle this one? Just talk about kind of once someone sees a realtor, they're going to go through some different loan programs, and based upon looking at some of those different loan programs, the amount of the down payment option, the amount that you pay up front is going to be different based on some of those programs.
Right. And, as a little bit of a side note, similar to, choosing a realtor, also choosing a lender is really important. There are tons of realtors out there. There are tons of loan officers, and both want your business. You need to find someone that you connect the best with and you feel like is going to guide you through this, especially on the loan side, because there will be multiple options that are available to you. You could, for instance, pay a little more money or a percentage of your loan amount to get a lower interest rate. And then the scenarios that Chris has mapped out here, you could potentially look at doing an FHA loan where you're doing about 3.5% down. That's going to keep more money in your pocket, but also give you a higher payment, and then private mortgage insurance that you're paying until you get to a better equity position. And then on the other end of the scale, you have 20% down or more, which is taking a whole lot more out of your bank account, but hopefully is reducing your payment. And then there's fixed loans, there's ones that adjust. So, looking at a couple of those scenarios with a lender and having them put together for you what's called a good faith estimate or a GFE. And that will detail out, if I buy a house for $500,000, what expenses am I looking at based on, taxes that I'm paying within that state and down payments, and what's the total cash that I need to bring to the table in order to buy this $500,000 house, and what's the difference if I put 20% down versus 10% down, and having a discussion with your family and the loan officer about what's the best decision, for you. And maybe only one of these options is available. You might say, well, I want to buy my first home and I know I'm going to have to look at a property that I can purchase with an FHA loan. And then it's just looking at those numbers and deciding if they're comfortable and reasonable for your life and how you want to spend your money.
Yeah, we do a lot of on the personal wealth side, we do a lot of work with our clients, meeting with them and their financial advisors to kind of figure out what that right balance is, because every situation's different. And, these are toggles. You can pay more, there's a pro and con to a higher down payment versus a lower down payment. And that impacts what your monthly expenses, what your monthly mortgage is. So again, it gets back to what's best for your situation, how much can you afford in the down payment, and then how does that impact your monthly expenses. So it's just knowing your own situation. And as mentioned, other things to consider with loans are, when you go for a loan, they're going to talk about fixed rate mortgages or adjustable rate mortgages. Fixed rate is just like it sounds. Your interest rate is locked in day one and it stays the same throughout the term of the loan. Terms are typically 15 or 30 years. And that was great. People looking to buy real estate now hear stories about how, interest rates 5 years ago were, 3%. And, to lock in that 3% rate for 30 years was a really great opportunity for people buying homes back then. Now, with rates, 6.5%, maybe, if you believe rates are going to go down, then maybe you look at an adjustable rate, but you can always refinance down the road too. The risk with adjustable rate mortgages is that it automatically adjusts after the initial term. So maybe you lock in with a lower starting rate, and that's locked in for 5, 7, 10 years, but automatically after that fifth year, it's going to adjust, and it could adjust up to a higher rate. And now all of a sudden you're forced into a higher payment. So it just depends on your situation, and it depends on the kind of the market environment as to whether a fixed or an adjustable rate mortgage is correct. Again, you're going to get advice and suggestions from your mortgage lender. They're going to be, a good trusted mortgage lender is going to give you some suggestions. And it's just important that personally what's best for you. And again, I think that's best done by you doing some preparation ahead of time on your own personal finances. And maybe if you have a financial advisor, you work with a financial advisor, have them involved in the conversation as well, so that you can truly lock something in that's the best fit for you. On the financial side, when it comes down to, yeah, you've got your down payment and then you've got your mortgage payment. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the actual monthly cost is typically, it's a lot higher than just what your mortgage payment is. You have to think about things. Your mortgage is going to be principal and interest, P&I. And this, again, example, $400,000 home, 10% down, 6.75% mortgage, 30-year fixed. This example, you're going to have a $3,400 total payment, but $2,300 of that is your mortgage payment, your principal and interest on the mortgage, on the loan. After that, you have to add on taxes, add on insurance, potentially, because there's only 10% down, you have to add on mortgage insurance, monthly expense. And then, there could be HOA cost, or there could be just, regular maintenance costs. And that's the important thing to remember too, is that, things do break. You do need new HVACs, you need new roofs, and you know, you can only an inspection and everything it only does so much to kind of tell you what's on the horizon for expenses. There's inevitably going to be a lot more expenses that
Yeah.
pop up if you're a first-time homeowner than what you're maybe accustomed to.
Yeah. Real
Um,
world example for me. My washing machine was less than 6 years old and it broke about 2 weeks ago. And the replacement cost of it didn't really make sense. So I wasn't expecting to have to put $1,000 into a new machine that's less than 6 years old, but needed a washing machine. So it had to happen. So
That's
you
what
have to
happens when you have
prepare
that's
for
what happens
those
when you have three
surprises.
boys. Yeah, when you have three boys washing
Yep.
machines.
I
So,
use that washing machine a lot.
right. Um, so yeah, and not to belabor the point, but also once you get into a home, you kind of want to make it yours. So a lot of times you think you move in, you think right away, oh, it's move-in ready. We're not going to need to do anything to it. You're going to sit in there for a month, and all of a sudden you're going to start finding things. Yep, I want to do that. That's not me. So there's going to be things that you want to do. So it's just you don't want to throw every last dollar at getting into the home and then not have the ability to absorb unexpected costs and or have the ability to do some things that you want to do to it once you're already in. And another thing to budget for, not only do you have additional things that get tacked on to the monthly payments, you also at closing. So you want to budget about 2 to 5% on top of your down of the purchase price. So $500,000 home, you're still going to want to budget, another few $1,000s on top of the down payment. And that's for lender origination fees, title insurance. A lot of these things are negotiable, but some of them are fixed and they can't be negotiated. So the bottom line, be prepared. When I bought my first home, I wasn't really prepared for this, to be honest with you. So when I showed up at closing and all of a sudden I had in my head exactly what the down payment was going to be, and that was the check I was ready to write. And then all of a sudden, it was several $1,000s more. And I said, oh, well, wasn't expecting that. So just make sure going in that you have a full awareness on all of that. And then we talked early on about why it's important to come up with your list of needs and your wants. And think about that, not only what you need in today's environment, think about it, what you're going to need for, the next 5, 10 years. Because the important thing to know when buying a home is that there is kind of a break-even point. We just talked about, you're going to be paying those closing costs. Those closing costs are several $1,000s. You're paying, property taxes, you're paying property insurance. So these are all kind of sunk costs. So the idea, if you buy a home for $400,000 and then, the transaction costs are $20,000, you're going to need some appreciation on that $400,000 purchase price. You're going to need some appreciation. You need some growth in the value of that house so that when you go sell it, you're able to recoup some of those expenses that you had. And, homes, the average, again, this is gonna it changes. It's all over the place depending on your locality. But what would you say is the average rate of return nationwide on a property, on typically on real estate? And I know I'm putting you on a spot nationwide because you work within a very kind of high fueled area, but
That's tough. I mean, various areas they talk about percentages that your home value will go up every year, but exactly like you mentioned, the transactional costs. I mean, there's such a big variation, type of property. I don't even know if I could guesstimate that, but certainly what you have on here about the break even zone is really important because if you're thinking you're going to be in an area for 2 years, I'm a realtor and I'm telling you, I don't think you should buy a house unless you plan on keeping it and renting it out because you're probably not going to break even selling it with all the expenses. But I don't know. I couldn't answer your question.
so we model
Yeah.
it. We model a lot of times. Again, it depends on the region where people are, but we're modeling traditional single family homes, average annual around 3%, kind of
Yeah.
keeping track with inflation to some degree.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not always in a straight line. Housing prices fluctuate. So The reason why people think that housing prices don't fluctuate is because it's not like the stock market. It's not like your 401k account balance where you see it change every single day. You don't see the value of your home change every single day. So you see it, you really care about it at the time you buy and the time you sell, and that might be 10 years apart. And, all of a sudden you do see that it appreciated in value. But, a that that appreciation occurred over a long period of time. So you just don't want to be forced to sell at the bad time because the place no longer meets your needs. And you also don't want to be in a position where you have to sell shortly after, within a couple of years of buying it because you're not going to make your money back.
And Zillow, for instance, is fun for people to check and see their value. It changes almost every day. And some cases it's kind of accurate, some it's very off. So don't get excited or depressed when you see a Zillow number for what your house is worth because it may not be completely accurate.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, because we're at time here, I just want to spend a little bit just kind of talking about second homes. If you're looking for a second property, whether it's for the family to enjoy, maybe you rent it out. It's just again, it's the important thing to know it's a lifestyle decision. So first and foremost, look at it not from really an investment perspective at first. Look at it from does this fit into our family and what we want? Do we want a place? And do we have the time to go visit a place to on the weekends, a beach house, a lake house, or what have you? So think about it first and foremost, just as you're doing, it's the same thought process as when you're buying, a house to live in. Think about what your needs and your wants are, first and foremost as a lifestyle decision. And then think about it, does it fit? What's the impact to my finances? Sure. It's again, just like it's gonna consume your financial resources. Whether you pay cash for the whole thing, great. That's cash that couldn't be invested elsewhere towards your retirement, towards kids' education, towards, any other sort of goal you might have. If you're going to have a mortgage on it, well, now there's another mortgage. That's another obligation you have every single month. Are you in a position to take on a second mortgage, additional payment? Is your job security there? Because if you lose your job, you lose your income. Well, all of a sudden you got two mortgages. Oh, well, now I can't hold on to that second house any longer because now I got to go sell it. Well, I bought it 2 years ago. Well, you paid a lot of upfront expenses 2 years ago. So now, you don't meet that time horizon. So again, it's really important to just consider your own financial resources before you're making that decision. And a final point on just if you're thinking about an investment property, say, hey, I know a lot of people that have made money in real estate. They have a bunch of rental properties. Well, do the math because we do the math on a lot of rental properties for clients of ours, and some work out great, and some they look back at it and you say, you know what, I'm only getting like a 3, 4, 5% rate of return on this investment. And oh, by the way, you're a landlord. Landlords, and it's real work. It's you can get a phone call any day from a disgruntled renter that says, I need a new ceiling fan. I need a new washer dryer broke. And guess what? Renters, you and I could live in our house and we could do with things not being perfect for a while. I got a janky shower door in my house right now. And it's been janky for 3 years and we just keep letting it go. A renter, it's very easy for them just to call up and say, hey, yeah, I need to get the shower door replaced. So as a landlord, you have to react to that. And now all of a sudden, not only is it just a time suck, it's also an expense. So if you're going to go into the housing, whether it's your primary house, your second home, or it's an investment property, it presents variable, unexpected expenses that at any point in time something could go wrong, could require thousands of dollars of outlay. And are you in a position where you have the reserves, the cash reserves to meet those to make those payments, or is it going to cause financial stress? Is it going to cause you to go into debt? So just again, buying a rental home, same as anything else. So to wrap up, buy with intention, know your situation, not just what you're approved for, define your needs, define your wants, look at your budget. Figure out what make sure you go in eyes wide open. What's the true monthly cost? Um, and how is that going to impact? Are you financially stable enough? Do you have enough job security to be able to take on that fixed financial cost? Because you're going to need to do it for ideally for a period of time, So is it a good lifestyle fit? Is it a good financial fit where you can commit for 5+ years to be in a place? And do if you're thinking about doing a second home or rental, just do your own due diligence. So, Lauren, anything to add here?
I thought you had some really good points, especially about rental properties and renters. They just don't take care of a house typically the way that you would take care of a house, and they are quick to just throw up their hands and say, "Oh, this is broken," or "This isn't working correctly." And on the flip side of that, if you're thinking about becoming a homeowner for the first time, you don't have the resource to call a lender or sorry a landlord and say we need our HVAC fixed. That's on you. So
Yeah.
you really have to prepare for that. But yeah, all good points. But find people that on the realtor side, on the lender side, that you think understand what you're looking for and are committed to helping you, especially if and Chris and I were talking about this before we got on, especially if you're in a tough negotiating situation on a property. I have a client that we just had to negotiate a big credit for the roof because the house that they were buying had a roof that was not in as good a shape as the seller thought it was. And just being able to work through that with them and find a good solution. So make sure you have somebody that's looking out for your best interests. And it's not the time to test out your sister's friend who just got her license and is looking for new business. It's a big, important decision. So find someone that knows your market and is experienced. That's really important.
Uh, Thanks for hanging with us a couple minutes longer here. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Reach out. We can put you in touch with Lauren if you have questions on the real estate side. If you just have questions about your own situation about, hey, I've been thinking about buying a house, renting a house, investing, and you just want to talk about it. Let's talk, and we can, we'll talk through, be a sounding board, and give you some suggestions on some next steps, some things you can do. Looking forward on the monthly webinars next month, we're going to look at the investment markets, talk about what's been going on in the investment world. It will be Thursday, July 16th. So we'll do a talk to investment markets. A lot of stuff going on the last few months. And August, we're going to do year-end financial planning, believe it or not. We started doing this a few kind of beginning of the fall, believe it or not, just because it gives you more time to kind of take action on some of the things that we're going to talk about for end of the year financial planning. And then September, October is a big month for November is a big month for a lot of open enrollments on benefit side. So we take some time there just to talk about your typical employer benefits and how you can use those employer benefits to impact your personal finances and tax planning as well. So that's it. Hope you'll join us in the coming months. Thank you for taking the time out today, and enjoy the hot month of July that's coming. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Lauren.
Hi, guys. Thanks. Thanks for having me.